Hi, this is John Sarver, and welcome to my solar story, sponsored by Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association and Michigan Solar Users Network. And tonight we have Jake Schuster from Harvest Solar. He's going to talk about the Yarema family's 11 kilowatt system in Oxford. And apparently they had some issues with zoning, which I'm sure Jake will talk about. And I believe the system will provide about 75% of their power. And one reason that I approached Jake about this was that we had a photo contest for our annual meeting that we just had, GLRA's annual meeting in December, and a photo of the Yarema family next to their ground mount system won first prize in the photo contest. So I thought, oh, this is a good system to recruit for the this series. And let's see, please mute yourself until we get through the presentation, and then you can unmute yourself and ask Jake directly some questions. So with that, Jake, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, John. Let me share my screen really quick and I'll do a little intro. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Jake Schuster. I work for Harvest Solar. We're based out of Jackson, Michigan. Sorry, just trying to pull that up really quick. Yeah, based out of Jackson, Michigan, been in business since 2006. I've personally been with Harvest for about 3 years now. So not that long compared to some of you guys that have been working in this industry, but it really attracted me. I came from the hospitality industry and things weren't going so well. So I kind of stumbled upon this career and have loved it ever since. But yes, this project with Lisa and John Yarema. So this is a shot of them right here and just some stats of their system. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it, but for those of you who are not, they have an 11 and a half kilowatt size system. These panels are Helene 385 watt monocrystalline panels. It has a 10 kilowatt Solaredge inverter, and it comes with the Solaredge power optimizers as well too. Like John said, it's about a roughly 75% offset for them. This customer is on DTE, so obviously with their DG rates, it makes a little bit of sense to undersize it for them right now. They plan on doing some additions to their farm in the future, and they'll probably upgrade and add on to their panels. Right now, it's kind of in an area where they keep some horses, but they are planning some kind of bigger ideas, some new buildings, and they're probably going to be moving around some fencing, and it's expanding the array in the future. So really the hiccup with this project, most projects 9 out of 10 go pretty smoothly. We may have some hiccups with zoning and stuff like that, but normally it's not a huge issue. I've only had one project that's ever taken as long as this one did right here. So pretty much what happened is once the customer signed the agreement and we set up their loan through Michigan Saves, which is a program that we use a lot for residential financing, we submitted everything to the township and applied for interconnection with DTE. And that's kind of when we ran into the first roadblock. So Dryden Township in Oxford, Michigan out there had a solar zoning document already written that stated that a homeowner cannot have a ground mounted solar array on their property that was bigger than 96 square feet. So one of these panels is roughly 22 square feet. So obviously this was a lot bigger than proposed. So the first step that we had to do is we had to apply for a zoning variance through the zoning board of appeals. We had to apply for a variance. So I went in with a customer, and this was kind of in the midst of COVID. So it kind of delayed some things, and there was a little weary meeting with a lot of people. Half the commission didn't show up the first time. So then we had to wait another month and reschedule it. So it got a little hairy, but we were able to push things through smoothly on the first meeting. They asked some questions about it. And frankly, they came to the conclusion that their ordinance was out of date. I mean, obviously 96 square feet of panels for a customer that has 10 to 40 acres, it's a small blip on their property, but they were aware that they had to rewrite some of the ordinances and that they were out of date. So they let us kind of push through. They gave us the approval. From there, we were supposed to go to the planning commission after we got the approval from the zoning board of appeals, but they actually issued us the permits early on accident. I feel like a lot of this came from just confusion with how their ordinance was written. It was outdated. They were kind of confused about it. They hadn't had a project in a while. So they actually issued us the permits for everything, said we were good to go build the array. We waited after that. We showed up on the customer's property to go build. Everything was approved. We had approval from DTE on interconnection, so everything was smooth sailing. The first day after we started building, the township called my cell phone and said, "Why are you guys building? You guys don't have approval yet." So of course that opened up a whole can of worms. The customer wasn't very happy, but pretty much they had made the mistake of giving us the permits to build the array too early. They said we had to first go to the planning commission to get approval before we could build. So obviously the array was already starting to get built. They were fine with it getting pushed through. Nobody really had any objections to it, but we had to stop construction. We had to wait, go through that process and get the approval, which delayed us about another week. We finally got the rest of the permits that we needed and everything, finished up building the array, and we were good to go from there. But that whole process, I mean, from when the customer, I think the date was the end of February is when the customer first signed the contract. Normally it takes 60 to 90 days roughly from signed contract to install, but we didn't finish this install up until I believe it was August. So it took a couple extra months for them, which obviously was missed out on the best portion of the solar production during the summer. You know, they were anticipating getting up and running in May or June, worst case, but then they get basically up and running in fall and missed out on the summer. So it sucked for them a little bit, but you know, they have a long-term mindset in this, and they see the value of solar long-term, and they know that they're definitely investing in their farm and investing in their kids' future. This is a shot of them here with their kids, Lisa and John, and their 3 kids there. They actually plan on building houses on this property, hopefully one day, and kind of expanding this usage and hopefully adding to the solar array in the future. I do have a shot here too of the monitoring too, just a little nice little thing to show you guys. Move things around there just to see how it's produced so far. So it got up and running in August. So far, they produced just under 4 megawatt hours, which is pretty good. They had a pretty solid end of August and early September. November and December have been a little bit tough so far for them, but they're right on track with their first couple of months of being installed. And the nice thing about Solaredge Monitoring, I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with it or seen it. I'm sure a lot of people have it in here, are familiar with it, but it actually lets you break it down and see per panel how much each individual panel is producing. It's a little bit behind right now, obviously. Well, it's dark in Jackson right now, so it's a couple hours behind, but you can see most of the time in real time how much the solar array is producing. So it's just nice to keep an eye on it. The customers and I like going through and seeing all of our sites just to see, make sure everyone's producing as they should, and make sure there's no problems as well too. But yeah, that's pretty much all I had. I mean, it was a lengthy process. Like I said, this was probably the second longest that an array has ever taken me personally to install in my three years at Harvest. The only other one was the exact same situation in Jackson. We were building a ground mount in the town inside in the city of Jackson that took about a year. That was in the city, so it was a little bit more understandable going through those hoops versus this one's kind of out in some farm, rural residential area. So that one was kind of surprising that happened. But even since we've pushed through, we've installed one more array that's in that township out in Dryden Township out in Oxford. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had. I know, sorry, that wasn't quite 30 minutes, but if anybody, I'm sure there's questions, or if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Sure, let me go with the first question is, I know Harvest does a lot of work with farms, and is this a typical size solar array for a farm? I imagine there's quite a range of different sizes because some farms are bigger than others.
Yeah, great question. I mean, it does depend on the type of operation you're running. This home right here, it's a ranch style home, about 2,500 square feet, if I had to guess. A couple of barns. Really, they only do, they have some chickens and they have some goats, so it's not a large operation. So I would say this is probably the typical size you'd see for like a home farmstead. We do a lot of systems with the bigger farms. We work with, a lot of hog farms and stuff like that are, maybe install up to 150 or 250 kilowatts, but those are the huge operations you see. Maybe they got some massive grain bins or a lot of big fans running and cooling barns and stuff like that. So for an average I'd say this is pretty good for average, but they do go a lot bigger once you get into more of the commercial side of farming, the larger operations and corporations.
I'm surprised they wouldn't want to be a solar farm and go and become a private utility. They got the room for it.
That's not real easy to do. Hey, Jake, you may want to stop your screen sharing and it'd be easier to see people who might be asking questions.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Yeah, if somebody would like to ask a question, just unmute and go ahead. Terry, did you want to ask a question? Okay.
There I go. All right. Hi, Jake. Good to see you. I'm actually out here on Silver Lake, so I'm west of Dexter. That's where I'm at. Any updates you might be able to give us on standalone systems, battery backup stuff?
Yeah, good question. We do a lot of battery installs. To be honest, right now, we only have one main battery backup that we offer. It's the Tesla Powerwall. That's the main battery that we install. The biggest concern right now is they are back ordered right now. They're out a couple of months for things right now. So there's been some delays with that. But as far as advancements, I mean, there's been technology advancements. There's new brands that are coming out and being tested. Unfortunately, not ready to be rolled out in Michigan or anything like that. But there's things coming down the pipeline, and they're getting cheaper. They're getting more cost effective as we see utilities change up their rates. Obviously, we see them become a part of a value with adding them onto solar and helping with the rate changes and stuff like that, but nothing major. But we hope that, I just personally hope that in the next 3 to 5 years, I think we're going to see a lot of advancements with things starting to roll out now. They'll take a little bit. They'll probably test them out in California and the hot markets, and then they'll start to work their way out here. So it's definitely coming. It's definitely coming.
Great. Thank you, Jake, very much.
No problem.
Hey, Jake, this is John Gorley. I'm kind of following on, I think it was Karen who remarked about installing a whole solar farm's worth of solar panels. I have a farmer neighbor who called me 2-3 weeks ago and asked what I thought of him taking an offer from DTE to install many megawatts worth of solar panels on his property. And I was wondering, my reaction was that he's got a really good, prosperous farm, and it seemed like it was a bad idea ecologically, if not economically too, to take over all that good farmland and use it for solar when there's lots of desert and other parts of the world that don't produce so well. I was wondering what your reaction would be if somebody came and asked you for advice. What if he called you up and said, "I've got this offer from DTE. What do you think I should do?"
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. And honestly, questions similar to that come up all the time. I'm definitely, pro environment, I guess is what I could say, especially when I go to, a potential customer's property and I'm assessing, and making a recommendation for them, I'm always going to prefer them to go on the roof versus the ground if they have the opportunity to, just to save that space. Just in general, on the average, it does get difficult. It would depend on, if the farmland is still being used, if it's useful or not. If it's just a brownfield or something that they can't use, then might as well. But if it still has value, then I see the value in just keeping it as is, because there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of the utility size solar and utility scale installations. We've installed a couple of megawatt, 5 megawatt systems, but we specifically look for pieces of land that aren't being used, that can't be farmed, that aren't good farmland that we're taking up, because then obviously you're trying to weigh, the pros and cons of taking up that area with solar versus with, agriculture or whatever at that point too. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that was kind of the same answer that I had, but I don't have any experience in the trade-offs. But they were approaching him specifically because he has a big high tension power line crossing his property, and so he was it would be easy for them to connect the solar into their network.
Yeah, they do. I know there's a lot of hoops to jump through on the utility side stuff. I mainly sell residential, ag, and commercial, but a lot of the utility scale stuff I've been kind of semi involved with, not directly. But there's a lot of hoops to jump through in finding the specific site, because you got to be so close to a substation, and you got to be in a certain area. So there's a lot of hoops to jump through. You know, being next to those high voltage power lines, that's definitely an advantage. So yeah, I mean, it's I can't give you a clear answer, but I mean, honestly, it would just depend on the situation. If it's still good farmland, I would say use it. But at the same time, if it's not being used, might as well make some solar on it.
Definitely being used.
Yeah.
But thanks.
Jake Clifton here. 2 questions. Have you done much digging into the potential changes in the solar rebates and incentives that are going to come online next year? Because it looks like that administration is going to enhance things. And then secondly, I'm in consumers just over the line from Leslie in Jackson County. Consumers doesn't seem to be terribly friendly to solar. Any thoughts on effective systems with consumers? I am planning to add solar. I got 10 acres. I got room on the roof. And starting to do some, serious groundwork.
Yeah, great questions. As far as the rebates, I know that with that stimulus package that they just passed, they did extend the federal tax credit, the 26% tax credit, 2 more years. So instead of it dipping down to 20, I believe it was 22% this year.
Yeah.
That got extended 2 years. But as far as local policies, like with the rate change that consumers just went through and them rolling out their new distributed generation program, they bumped up your retail rate for, the average homeowner in commercial sites. That retail rate just got bumped up, and they also cut down your buyback rate. It is similar to DTE's policy now. So really, it depends on your situation. I mean, if you're more of a return on investment focused person, you might want to look at a smaller array offset, like this customer in the photo with DTE's program and a lesser buyback. They sized it specifically to be a 75% energy offset. So
that's my goal, is to stay under the annual usage.
Yeah, just because, I mean, it'll be your quickest return on investment with staying around 3/4 worth of power. I mean, if they were buying at a 1-for-1 like consumers was recently, then going 100% makes all the sense in the world. But 75%, that's usually what we see for a yearly offset. That tends to be your best return on investment with kind of how the policies line up right now. But it does depend on your usage too. I mean, if you're using electric heat and most of your usage is coming in the winter, then honestly, consumers policy just became like a worst case scenario for you at that point.
Yeah, we got a heat pump, so it's almost electric heat.
Yeah, it makes it tougher. I mean, you still see that return on investment, and the numbers still pencil out over time, but it does become a lot more tough with them basically cutting your credits in half and raising the retail rate. So it does still work out and pencil out over time. It's just a little bit tougher with the new rates that they've been passing.
Do you do systems at all where the locally generated power stays local on some way of segregating loads off of the grid, so I don't have to go up to consumers and back and lose in the round trip? I mean, the wiring sounds like it's a pretty big challenge.
Yeah, I mean, we have arrays, all over, but they're just powering the individual sites. And yeah, when you think about it, you're sending back to the grid, but that's still being distributed. I don't believe we have any sites, unless something was installed before I came on in the last few years, that's powering a facility directly. I know some of the megawatt sites that we have, those are technically, producing themselves, but it's pretty much just going into a substation and stuff like that. But no, that's a good question. I'm not too sure. I don't think
we're in the 5 to 10 kW range, so fairly small. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
I have a question about buyback rates. What are the rates for DTE versus consumers power?
Well, DTE, I believe I'd double check on this to make sure. It's been a minute since I've been in the west side of the state mainly right now. But DTE, I'm pretty sure theirs is about a 7.5-cent buyback. It's pretty much a wholesale rate. Consumers just changed it up, and I think it's a little bit more. I think it's closer to 8 cents. They haven't rolled out the official rate, I don't believe yet, but I think it's about 8.
Explain 8 cents.
Okay, yeah. So basically, so the extra kilowatt hour that you're sending back, it's an instantaneous buyback. So your solar is offsetting all of your costs during the day when it's producing. But if it's ever producing more than you need, you start to push and send it back to the grid. Anytime you're sending that energy back to the grid, they're automatically crediting you 8 cents per kilowatt hour that you send back.
I guess, but what I'm missing is how much, I don't know how much I'm paying per kilowatt hour right now.
Are you on DTE or consumers?
DTE.
I probably have to guess it'd be 16, 17 cents in that area is how much they're charging you.
So it's about 50%. And when they publish a rate, how long do we know that that's going to stay into effect? I mean, can they just overnight change it, or once a year, or I just don't trust them.
Yeah, that might be a question for John Sarver over there.
Yeah.
He might be able to answer that one.
Yeah. What happens is, utilities have rate cases that go in front of the Michigan Public Service Commission. And the rate cases are basically what determines if there's a new rate or not. And those are always contested cases because there's interveners that are going in and saying, that's too much, So basically, utilities could, a rate case takes like 10 months. And so, you could have a utility go in every year. And so the rates potentially could change every year. But then again, a utility might decide that they don't want to go through a new rate case. And so the existing rates may last for a couple years, but they don't change until a case goes to the Public Service Commission, the state, and it goes through the whole process and gets approved. So yeah, they can't change them overnight. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, Jake, do you ever look at time of use rates in calculating or estimate like the payback for somebody's system? Because with, and this goes maybe to Clifton's question, which maybe sort of sounded like, would it be of use to have a battery? If you have a battery, you can shift some of your usage from day to night. Not really, you can't shift on a seasonal basis because that would be an absurdly huge sized battery. But anything you can do to increase your usage when it's sunny out or stick it in a battery reduces how much you send out to the grid, and you get kind of the wholesale rate for electricity, which is the normal rate you'd pay in that time, not including the transmission. So the transmission is usually 7 or 8 cents a kilowatt hour. So when you go on time of use, your peak cost, the total retail cost, is something like 23 cents a kilowatt hour. And you can get still a credit of maybe 15 or 16 cents. The other thing to remember for anybody is that credit is only good for buying back the power. It still doesn't, you can't use it to pay for the transmission when you bring your power back. So it's kind of, and if you're on the regular retail rate, one way to think of it is you get 50% credit when you send it out. And then that's not really a full credit. That's kind of like a coupon to get electricity back at half of the retail rate again. So you could think of it as you're getting 25% back. But
Dale, I've looked at that concept because I'm on a split rate with an electric car, and from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m., my rate is almost double.
Yeah,
it's a really big hit, but I had to switch to that to get the electric car kind of thing.
So yeah, you can that's like the night rate that you can get, and so you're
no, they changed it. It's the current one. It's standard and gross. gross standard and horrible. The cheap night rate's gone. This is
Oh.
consumers.
All right.
Yeah, and so the level shifting of create it, load the battery and then push it back at the expensive time doesn't really work because the battery would have to be humongous to pay for the battery. And the peak time for cost and the peak time for creation actually overlap. So in that case, the level shifting is sort of built in because of the time of their peak rates and the time of the sun. And I've got all of my big loads that I can on timers, so they are shifted away from the peak time. So I'm shifting probably 10 to 20% of my peak rate load over. But the killer is, of course, the heat pump.
Yeah.
So
I have a different kind of battery question. I wish I could remember the name of the company, but there was a Wall Street Journal article about a week ago, a battery company that was competing with Tesla, and their stock went up about 700% in the past year. I was wondering who knows about battery companies and who's taking over market share. I think I lost.
Yeah, I think we none of us are kind of commenting because I think it's a pretty a lot is changing. Prices are going down, and yeah, it's a competitive market, and yeah, so it's I don't have the answer to your question, and I think it's unless you really pay attention to that specific industry, it's I think it's hard to even make a comment because things are changing quite quickly.
All right. Well, thanks.
Jake, with my question was kind of long and complicated, but do you have you looked at that in estimating paybacks, and do you have any kind of general rules of thumb that you have learned from doing that kind of analysis?
Yeah, so we look at it a lot, obviously, with customers on DTE. To be 100% honest, my territory is basically west side of the state, so I do a lot of consumers and AEP and some of the smaller guys. So it's been a minute since I've looked at the time of use rates, but I know just specifically working with my coworker who works on that side of the state, it is taken into account in the software that we use. You can basically set which rate you're on pre-solar and post-solar. So that is factored in to the ROIs and our proposals and stuff like that too. But it depends on, the homeowner and how their usage lines up to really find the best rate for them and what's going to save them the most money and quickest payoff.
Yeah.
Well, Jake, a related question is, I know one thing I've been trying to get a handle on is a lot of commercial institutional buildings are on demand rates. And so they have fairly low kilowatt hour charges. And so at least in theory, batteries can be used to kind of deal with cutting those demand peaks. Have you found with any of your commercial customers that that's become an issue that, in order to get a good payback, you got to deal with the demand charges, and maybe that leads to looking at batteries?
Yeah, and I know sizing our larger commercial system, it really just comes down to sizing, breaking down their usage, seeing where it's coming from and when it's coming, and just trying to find the right system size for them. A lot of our commercial systems, though, are on the demand rate. It does make it a little bit tougher. Saves them some money, right now, but most of the time, if they're going solar, we'll have them switch over, just again, depending on the situation, switch their rate up if they can. Sometimes that works out a little bit better for them, but usually the demand rate saves you if you're not going solar, but it'll hurt you if you do go solar. So it's just trying to find out.
So did I understand you correctly that one of the things that may happen with some of your commercial customers is they actually go off of the demand rate in a different rate where basically the less demand charges, higher kilowatt hour charges, and so the solar system is more advantageous?
Yes, and it's really on the larger commercial systems. To be frank, I don't have 100% experience. That's Ken, my manager, that usually deals with that stuff. But yes, exactly like you said, it'll save them money. It's just trying to find out which rate will, save them the most money versus what size system. They're 50, 100, 200 kilowatts, and just trying to find that sweet spot for them.
Jake, you said you had a lot of paperwork problems with the last project. If you didn't have all those problems, how long would it have taken from day one to operation?
Normally it's 60 to 90 days, rough timeline. Most of that comes down to just how long permits take and utilities. We had some delays with COVID. Some townships were closed or working remotely, and they took a lot longer. That probably played a factor into it as well too. But most of the time, it's, if things are running as normal, it's usually 60 to 90 days, sometimes a little bit longer. But this one was obviously more than twice that. So it just a lot of delays, but normally 60 to 90 days.
Other questions?
Yeah, this is John Freeman, Jake. I have a question for you. For a typical residential system, what portion of the overall cost of installing a system can be attributed to permitting and paperwork, and those kind of soft costs?
Yeah, I would say, oh, sorry.
The reason why I'm asking is that there was an article in the New York Times recently that the cost of installing a comparable solar system in Australia is probably 2/3 cheaper or 1/3 cheaper than in America, because they have much more national uniformity regarding permitting fees and the whole process of getting a permit. So it just saves solar installers a considerable amount of money and time in terms of these soft costs. So the overall cost of the system is therefore less expensive. And so one of the ideas I'm toying with, and we've had some conversations with GLREA, is whether we try and approach the state of Michigan to try and get more uniformity for permitting and permitting fees and that kind of, process.
Yeah, I mean, great question / point. I mean, that's honestly what takes us the longest is, a lot of the stuff we have on site, we have materials in hand, in our shop. So we're ready to build, but it's waiting for a lot of the red tape to get pushed through. And obviously there's some, engineering drawings and stuff that has to get done that take probably a couple of weeks, 30 days, that takes some time. But a lot of the hang up is through permits. So if there was something a little bit more uniform, it would be, I think, extremely beneficial. When I first started with Harvest, I was pretty much just doing residential across the entire state, and there was no township that was similar to the other. I mean, there was different documents, different papers, different prices. I mean, you could look at a 5 kilowatt system in Ann Arbor might only be, $1,000 in permits, but a 5 kilowatt system, a little bit more rural, maybe is like $200. So if I know costs are different per area, but even just having a, kind of a set document or forms to fill out or something to make it a little bit more uniform would definitely make it a lot more beneficial, which, like you said, would save us a heck of a lot of time. We could install faster, we could save, cut costs, save more money, and which would ultimately come back to the homeowner or customer.
For a moment, I was afraid you were thinking of moving to Australia.
Me or Jake?
Whoever was asking the question. You, John.
No. I'm here. I got a kid in college, so I'm not going anywhere.
I like John's point there about, paperwork being easier somehow, but Jake, what do you see as the biggest, hurdles or whatever for getting, either convincing or selling solar to customers in the first place, or whether it's, I don't know, what do you think the biggest hurdles are to getting more installed and getting less people off the utilities as much as possible?
Right. Yeah. I mean, just in my experience in doing this, I think paperwork and the little details, they make up for it. Sorry, I have a little dog that's trying to bust in here right now, so I apologize. But yeah, so the biggest hurdle that I see is, a lot of people, they view the investment as long-term, obviously, but, with people don't realize the bill that they're paying today is also increasing and going up compared to the cost of solar. Is what I tell people is, you're basically buying 25 to 40 years worth of energy. The only catch is you got to pay for it all up front, but you're locking it in at a much lower rate versus the utilities that may not increase your rates for another year or two, but then they're going to drop a 15 to 20% rate increase, make up for all of that, and you're going to end up ahead going solar anyways. So I'd say cost, upfront costs of the sticker shock was probably the biggest deterrent for people, but programs like Michigan Saves and having that residential financing has been kind of a godsend because it's made going solar for the average homeowner a lot more affordable, and they can visualize it in a monthly payment that's comparable to their energy bill right now, versus paying all in cash or stuff like that. But a lot of the details, like you said, permitting and some of the delays and stuff like that, somebody doesn't, when I say, okay, sign on the contract and we'll be out here in 60 to 90 days, it's, oh, I got to wait 3 months, for this thing to show up when you have all the material in your shop 45 minutes away.
Yeah, people like instant gratification once they decide too.
Oh yeah.
Hey, Jake, I thought your comment earlier before we got started was interesting about how many jobs Harvest has created during the past years, because what you said, you started there 3 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah, and since then you've added approximately how many staff, or has it doubled, or
Roughly, I want to say we were around 50-ish when I first started, and now I think we're close to 100.
Yeah, wow, that's great, because you're creating good paying jobs all over the state, probably. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have crews kind of? I assume people are kind of, because it's field work, a lot of them are working out of their homes, and so people are probably those solar installer staff are probably spread all over the state, I'm guessing.
Yeah, we're kind of all over the Midwest. Most of it's in Michigan and Illinois, some in Indiana, but the bulk of it's in Michigan. But most of the crews, they're usually gone for the week unless they're within an hour or two, then they usually come home. But most of the time our crews are pretty much out Monday through Friday, driving 6+ hours a day, going to sites and installing. But that's one of the nice things about being turnkey and having everything in-house is everything's in-house. So we don't have to worry about subcontracting and stuff like that for engineering and electrical and construction and even so.
Yeah, that's a real plus. Being that size, that's you got some real advantages. Yeah,
it's fun. Some headaches, but it's fun.
Yeah. Anything else good at the cause?
Do you just use the one type of solar cell, or do you use a whole different variety?
All of our panels are monocrystalline. I don't really think we've used poly, at least since I've been here. There might be some still in stock, but we switch it up. I mean, it's all just depends on the brand. Most of the time right now we're installing Canadian solar. We had Helene, that's another Canadian brand as well too. We've installed brands like SunPower in the past before too. So we usually stick to the same few brands, but it's all just finding which panels are going down in price, and we'll kind of stock up on those for a little bit and offer them a little bit cheaper. So just trying to, see what's in stock and the best, I want to say bang for your buck. That makes it sound cheap, but.
Well, in what situations do you use microinverters, and what situations do you use the optimizers?
So we use optimizers for it's really anything like 25 kilowatts and below. We really don't use many microinverters much anymore. They were a SunPower deal. They came with their own microinverters on the back, SunPower branded panels. They worked really well. Honestly, we didn't really have any major issues with them. Obviously, more parts, a couple of more headaches in there, but nothing too crazy. But it was we mainly moved to a Solaredge. I'm not sure if that was a company head decision or what, but I've just found that it's a little bit cheaper than the microinverters. Knock on wood, we haven't had too many problems with them yet. Hopefully I didn't just jinx myself, but it's been a solution that's worked for us now. And SunPower, I think that was just been in the last couple of months that we stopped selling them. So it's just been pretty recent that we've stopped really installing the microinverters.
And I know microinverters have a pretty long warranty. Do optimizers also have a really long warranty?
I believe it's 25 years through Solaredge, if I'm not mistaken. It matches up. I know their inverter warranty is 12 years. You can bump it up to 15 years now, but I'm pretty sure their power optimizers are either 20 or 25 years.
Pretty good.
Yeah. And the microinverters, those were 25 years with the panels.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Are the current Solaredge systems like that with the optimizers, do they do the rapid shutdown requirement, or is that just something specific for California or some markets?
I believe the rapid shutdown we don't need one unless it's on a rooftop, I believe is the only time we need a rapid shutdown with Solaredge.
So the rooftop systems that you do, you put something extra on to accomplish that, or?
Oh, I'm sorry, I got myself confused. Sorry, it's been a long day. No, the rapid shutdown, we have them on ground mounts and roof mounts, but I don't know why I just confused myself with something. I was just talking to somebody about this today and now I'm blanking on it. I apologize.
That's okay. No, that's okay.
No, you're good. I'm pretty sure we install them on both. I mean, you have the main disconnects and all that, but rapid shutdown, this is going to bug me because I was just at a site today that I'm pretty sure had one.
There were, I'm not that familiar with it, but like some of the SMA inverters have optimizers, and then they had like two different versions of them. One that adds the capability to do rapid shutdown, and other ones that don't. And I wondered if the Solaredge and their optimizers are a similar way.
Yeah, I believe so. I'm trying to look through some documents and see if I can find it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with the rapid shutdown concept. It sounds like you simply turn off the DC to AC conversion quickly.
It's a requirement. I don't know if it's specific to California, and it's certainly something more to do with or applicable to having them on your roof. The idea is that if someone's going to be up there like a firefighter, you don't want to have DC voltage live that they could get shocked by. And so if it's a central inverter or a string inverter system, the inverter's usually down like on the wall outside or your garage or whatever, and you have DC voltage running all the way up to the roof.
Yeah.
And if the sun is out, and if it's just old-fashioned way would be all of the panels are in series, and so if the sun is out, there's high voltage on them.
Gotcha.
Coming back down. And so there's a number of issues with, not issues, but concerns with having that. So if it's microinverters, they have this, the benefit is that there's no real exposed high voltage because each panel goes right to its own microinverter, and you right away have 240 volts AC alternating current, which is basically what you have in your house already. And if you turn off the whole house, then that's dead right away too. And so for the DC systems, some of the optimizers, which are kind of like a microinverter that go on the back of each panel, takes the DC from the panel, and then it can throttle that and kind of match it so that all of the panels together, they work together.
Yeah, I know the optimizers.
And so some of them.
So this is a signal that comes back from the main controller and tells them basically to shut down and open the circuit.
Yeah, there's different ways of doing that, but that's the idea. Yeah.
Okay.
So then you don't have exposed high voltage between them, like back, the run from the panels back down to wherever the inverter is. There's no high voltage anymore. But I don't know whether that's something we're generally installing here in Michigan where we have to worry about or not. Like,
well, sounds like if California's doing it, we will be sooner or later because it'll move into the code.
Yeah, some of it is in NEC code, but I'm not sure if all of it is or not. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Did that ring a bell, Jake? Or
yeah, I was looking through things, and it just, I mean, I know that I don't believe they were required, but I know that we have installed them on some of the larger commercial jobs that we have done. So I'll have to get back to you on that one. But that's I need to find that out.
Lots of good questions. Yep. Any more before we break? Okay, well, gee, thanks, Jake. This has been very helpful. Another great story, a lot of good discussion. Next Thursday, we're going to have Marshall Clabeau, who's going to talk about the MSU Housing Cooperative solar installations. And they won a prize in the photo contest too. So Marshall's going to talk about what the MSU Housing Cooperative doing from a solar perspective. And so with that, thank you everybody for attending, and I hope to see you next Thursday. Take care. And again, Jake, thank you very much for a very informative presentation.
Dale, did we want to talk right now?
Yeah, if you want to, sure, yeah. You can. Give me a
Okay,
call.
I'll give you a call in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, that's